Welcome to episode 2 of the Power Armour podcast. For this episode I'd like to discuss environmental control systems for suits of power armour or exoskeletons. I've been given this a lot of thought lately and was really inspired to make this episode 2 because of Installation 00 and his work on his Mjolnir project. For those of you who are not aware of this particular project, Installation 00 is trying to create a real-world version of Mjolnir. And, well, it's... he's making a bit of progress, and he's been doing a lot of focus on the environmental control systems, mostly the heating and cooling side of things, which has really gotten me thinking about that a lot. Though the first time I really thought about heating and cooling for a powered exoskeleton or a superpower armor would probably be when the idea was raised in a thread on the United League of Armourers forum, where they were discussing what real-world technology they would like to implement in a suit of armour, and someone suggested air conditioning, and take my money. So now the most bare bones option for a cooling system for a superpower armor or an exoskeleton would probably be something like an ice pack worn by marathon runners, which is essentially just a vest that you insert some ice packs into, which is really bare bones and basic. But if you're gonna be testing out a suit of power armor or an exoskeleton and you just need something to use in your test bed prototype, then that might be a workable option. However, I am more interested in potentially having a more advanced cooling system. The next step up from that would be a typical cooling vest. You can buy these on the internet, and they are vests that have tubing going through them that circulates a fluid for coolant, and this typically goes to a thermos that is filled with ice water. Now, you could have it circulating the ice water itself, or you could be having it pump a coolant through a coil or something that is placed inside of the ice water in the thermos so that the coolant does not mix with the ice water. But, that's technical details. There is a video that I would highly recommend you watching if you're interested in the subject of cooling systems, which is Adam Savage from Mythbusters did a video building an air conditioning system for his cosplays. It's a rather fascinating build. He's teamed up with a gentleman who developed the system for use in spacesuits, and it is basically it's a small refrigeration unit that cools down fluid for a cooling vest, so it's basically the same as the cooling vest with the thermos, but instead you've got a powered refrigeration unit. And interestingly enough, the lightweight pumps that are used for the compression to create the refrigeration unit were developed as part of the Talos initiative. Those of you who are interested in power armor and powered exoskeletons might be aware of the Talos project. Yes, that Talos project. So, yes, some technology has come out of that. And this gentleman who is building a cooling system with Am Savage has also built this for spacesuits that are being used to train astronauts out in the desert. There is a Mars colony simulation where they need cooling systems for the suits because they're actually out in the desert. Though there were cooling systems and are still cooling systems in actual spacesuits. And some of the earliest ones that I've found in my research into the design of spacesuits have been that cold fluid being circulated around the body system with the ice water. I don't know if they're probably still not doing that now that they have powered ones, but then that brings us on to Installation 00's project. What he's using is a Peltier array, or a Peltier device, which I'm not really familiar with these things, but from his explanation, you run a current through it, and it conducts heat forcibly from one side to the other. So one side of it will get cold, and the other side gets hot. He is then using a thermal conductor to then conduct that to the fluid and circulating that around the body, and on the other side putting a radiator on it and having a small electric fan blow air over the radiator to dissipate heat. It's a very interesting build, and honestly I would like to have a go at that one if I don't end up just buying a system straight off the shelf. Being super technical with building a cooling system is not essential for me building a Power Armour testbed prototype, so I might end up just going with the cold water option, but there are commercially available cooling suit systems that I can buy, so I will maybe look into, look at what my options are and what I can do with the money I have, or the funds available that I'm willing to spend, because there's maybe more important things that I need to spend my money on. What I really hope Installation 00 does is monetizing it, maybe similar to the way David Guyton does his templates. I really hope that he will, make the guide available for purchase and or free, and then simply have a Amazon store where he sells all of the components, and I think I will have to have a close look at that if that becomes an option and weigh out my options, because I would love to build that system of his after he's worked out all the nuts and bolts, done the hard work for me figuring it out, and I'll just steal his design. Well, not steal, buy. Maybe steal. Yeah, it's very interesting. Now, Installation 00 is using basically an electric heating system similar to electric blanket, I believe, or it's basically that same thing but in a shed, which is rather simple, and you know what, it works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'd be interested to see if that's a more weight and energy efficient option than to try and capture the heat off of the hot side of the Peltier array. If you could possibly design it so that the Peltier array works for both heating and cooling and conducting to the fluid medium to either circulate hot or cold water around your body. But if that's more energy intensive and too much of a engineering pain, I don't see why not having just an electric blanket type system or something similar. Now, if you're using a thermos, then the obvious solution would be to just put warm or hot water in it as an alternative, which isn't really that big of a concern to me because I'm operating in Queensland, Australia. Though, granted, it can get quite cold at night time, especially during winter, especially up in the mountains, but it's probably more applicable to all the power armor builders over there in Russia. Yes, I've heard, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been told that it occasionally gets quite cold in Russia. So, yeah. Hi, all of my Russian friends out there building suits of power armor and exoskeletons. There is quite a fascinating, seemingly, yeah, there's quite a community of Russians building power armor, and yeah, there's some good stuff there working on. We might have to break down, the hobbyist power armor building community into a future episode. In fact, I've actually started planning that episode, but it's good. Not too far off topic. Now, that's good for systems where it's in contact with your body. There is an alternate option, which would be to have you in an enclosed system, basically having an air gap between your body and the suit. I'm not a big fan of this design, because I have my concerns about how you're going to orientate the limbs in relation to your actual body and move around. However, if you do go with a fully enclosed system that is pressurized for other environmental factors, perhaps you're building a powered exoskeleton for going underwater, which I'm certainly not doing that, or definitely not building one to go into space. I know there is at least one guy who is building DIY spacesuits as a bit of a hobby. I've reached out and tried to get in contact with him, but he's a bit hard to get into contact with. But no big deal. But it is a fascinating little project, so if you're interested in that, maybe do a quick look up on either Google or YouTube, look up DIY spacesuit or homemade spacesuit. I'm sure you should be able to find him. It's a bit of an interesting hobby and something I can definitely relate to after the effort I've put into my fully enclosed suit of armour and looking at my future goals of building a powered exoskeleton armour. Yes. I can relate to his struggle, though mine is slightly different. But yes, if you're not in contact with it, then if you're not in contact with the inside of the armour, then you can actually circulate air around yourself. Could be interesting if you're building a fully enclosed, pressurized system. Something you might want to look into if you're interested in that as a design concept is, again, Adam Savage on Tested went to look at the EVA spacesuit for the movie Aliens. What was that Aliens movie? One of the bad ones. Covenant? I think it was Aliens Covenant. If you look up Adam Savage on Tested Alien Spacesuit, it's the big yellow one that's got a hard outer shell that articulates via basically wheel bearings. And for a design for power armor, that is quite an interesting design. And it is, to my knowledge, based on dive suits that have a hard outer, basically a rigid exoskeleton dive suits. There are other designs, but that's one design, and it's what that movie prop is based on, and is quite an interesting way to articulate limbs. But that's an interesting suit to go and have a look at, because it is a well, it's not completely enclosed because they believe they leave the back of it open for ventilation and other reasons, but it's a rigid, non-powered exoskeleton that is designed to be very comfortable for the person wearing it. And so, looking at some movie props can be interesting to get ideas on ergonomics and comfort of, comfort for the wearer. So they've got some interesting ideas. One of which is using a breathable spacing material. It appeared to be like basically a net, so that you'd have like a foam mesh that you're in contact with, which might be how they orientate the hard outer layer to the inner body by having the body in contact with a net held on the inside, so that you're in contact with that instead of the outer frame, and it's a breathable material, so they're able to circulate air around you, which I can see why that might be a more comfortable option. Would be good for evaporating away sweat, and wouldn't have to. You might not have to worry about the fit as much if you've got that much of a gap around you. Though, what really appealed to me with that build, other than the fact that it was absolutely fascinating, was that you could, from what I understand, pull your arms in and just basically be inside of the suit without your arms trapped in the limbs, which would be interesting for if you need to get out of the suit in emergency, but also if you get an itch. Speaking of which, now I've got an itchy back, which reminds me of Starship Troopers. There's a line in Starship Troopers where they're talking about their suits of power armor, and the feature that he absolutely wants and wishes they had was the ability to scratch your own back while you're in a suit of power armor, which, yeah. I digress. I ramble on a lot. That's one of the reasons why I decided to make podcasts for a change, so I can just ramble on a lot. But yeah, having a breathable material as a net is an interesting feature for allowing sweat to evaporate. However, failing that, and if you're going with a more close-fitting exoskeleton, then you probably do want to consider moisture wicking for an inner layer. Again, like they do with spacesuits. Yeah, we keep coming back to spacesuits. I mean, a lot of research and development has been done into spacesuits to make it a wearable exoskeleton, and yeah, some of them are actually powered exoskeletons, at least in the hands. So yeah, and they are armored. So yeah, spacesuits are a real world form of power armor. I believe I've heard bits and pieces about them wanting to like fully power the limbs in spacesuits for the future. I listened to a lecture, didn't have picture, and you go back and watch it. It sounded like they were talking about it. I just need to confirm that. Yeah, from what I hear, there are people who are working on making suits of power armor for space exploration, which, what a time to be alive. But, side note, because we're talking about space and armor and power armor and that, if you're interested, because, we're talking about space armor, Operation Horizon is an absolutely fascinating declassified white paper from the American, so I'm not sure what part of their defense force worked on it, but yeah, it was a white paper wargaming how to defend nuclear launch sites on the moon from the Soviet Union. So there's a whole heap in there on how they were planning to repel an infantry assault by the Soviets against their nuclear launch moon base. I wish I could see you Russians who follow my stuff's faces right now. I mean, this is like just after World War II, so I think this is actually even before Sputnik. And yeah, I think the program got cancelled when they set up NASA. I mean, that's how far back it was. It's a fascinating document, and there are some wild things in there. If you want a nice overview of it, Tank Encyclopedia did a video on it. I highly recommend it. It is so retro sci-fi. You gotta go see it if you're into that kind of stuff. But in there was a concept drawing for armor plates for basically to armor a spacesuit in case you had to go fight the Soviets outside of your moon base. I'm not making this up. They actually had a document trying to work out strategies for that. And it's been declassified for ages. There's nothing critical in there because, well, to the best of my knowledge, they have not built that moon base yet. But you know, Space Force is a thing. Oh, yeah, crazy. Sorry, bit of a side tangent. Alright, rolling back. We've done heating, we've done cooling. What else is there? For environmental control. Hazmat. Of course, the obvious solution would be to have some type of filter on your intake valves. Gas mask is an option, but if you've basically got a pressurized helmet, or you're circulating air through your helmet, which might be something you would have to do to stop the visor from fogging up. That is something that comes up in a lot of Adam Savage's videos when they're talking about spacesuits for movies and spacesuits in general, and trying to have the visor just not fog up so you can actually see out of the thing, which if any of you have been done up in gas masks and stuff and goggles and stuff, when those things fog up, it is such a pain. But I spray herbicide for my job, so occasionally we have to wear all kinds of PPE. So yeah, nothing too extravagant. But yeah, it can be a bit of a pain. So if you've got that system pulling in air, circulating it to stop your visor from fogging up, and that is your air intake. If you've got it with just slightly more pressure inside of the helmet than outside of the helmet, then any leaks, which of course there are going to be leaks, but with an overpressure system, the gas is all going out. So if there is anything in the air around you that you don't want to breathe in, be it particulates or hazardous materials, possibly chemicals, it should in theory not be able to penetrate into the helmet. This is not something I'm planning on doing with mine, because my armour I want to build is really just a proof of concept test bed design. Maybe that's a stretch goal, but honestly, when it comes to NBC systems, I would not trust anything that I would personally build. You would really want to see a professional about that kind of thing. But if you've got an intake fan, or you're compressing, or you're pulling in air to compress so that you've got an overpressure system, then you can pop a HEPA filter or appropriate air filters on the outside of that. That is an option if you're going to go that extreme. I'm not sure if anyone other than possibly Installation 00 is interested in attempting something that extreme. I'm not. And yeah, dealing with high pressures and stuff, I'm not really keen on doing that because I'm not sure what could go wrong, and I'm not sure what the negative consequences of things that could go wrong with playing around with overpressured helmets. Actually, yeah, that sounds terrifying. Slightly overpressure, like slightly higher pressured atmosphere, but a little bit than the outside. Another thing you could research if you were interested in that kind of thing would be environmental controlled hazmat suits, which are a thing. If you absolutely want to go down that route, but that's not really what I'm interested in. However, the idea of having internal oxygen supply does sound kind of cool. I've kind of been a little bit interested in the idea ever since the intro of the book Have Spacesuit Will Travel, where the young man gets himself a decommissioned spacesuit and refurbishes it and goes and tests it by jumping into water and does all kinds of stuff, and I'm like, wow, that sounds super interesting. It's super fun, but it's not something I'm interested in doing. I mean, especially not refurbishing a used spacesuit. I mean, okay, so you can actually buy second-hand spacesuits on eBay. Last time I checked, someone is selling Russian spacesuits on eBay. Yeah, I don't have that kind of money to waste on that. But if you're curious, go have a look. It's fascinating. But I digress. It could be interesting if for, of course there's deep sea applications, there's space applications. That's way outside of the scope of anything I would personally be building. Then of course there's also environmental stuff, so having an internal air supply is interesting, but it's beyond the scope of anything I'm planning on ever building. For now. Alright everyone, hope you've enjoyed this. If you've got any more information or other things you'd like to talk about, please come and join me on Facebook for the Power Armour Research Group, and just dump all of the data and all of the sources you've got in there. That's why that group exists, so that like-minded people can just get together and compare notes and show off your Power Armour build if you're building one, show off real-world exoskeletons that you've found in your research that you think are cool, anything related to the subjects of Power Armour, exoskeletons, or armour. Just feel free to dump it in that research group. So it's a huge pool of information. That's what I designed it for. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please share it with other people who are interested in Power Armour and exoskeletons, all that cool kind of stuff. And hopefully I'll see you again soon. See yas.